We do have some registered speakers right now. Not right now. Those are all listed. Kelly, I think you have a letter to read.
I do. I have a letter to read. It's from Boris Dillevue. He lives at 1725 Huntington Road. It states, due to the fact I cannot attend city council meetings, I would like to have this read into the public comments portion of the city council meeting. The city of Waterloo has one of the highest tax rates in the state of Iowa. I feel some of our spending habits is a large portion of the reason. I will point out one example of this. The city of Waterloo bought the John Stone property on West 6th Street on September 28th, 2015 for $470,000. The two parcels were paying $11,094 in taxes per year. At the time of purchase, this was 5 years ago, the taxpayers have lost $55,470 over the 5 years we have owned it. We have paid interest on $470,000. We paid to buy it. We also lost all fees this building would have paid for 5 years. 5 years franchise fees, stormwater fees, fire inspection fees, legal fees to buy it, property care, snow cleanup, mowing, and maintaining the building. Purchase fee and taxes alone are $525,470 in taxpayer losses. This is just one of the deals we made. A Waterloo City Council member once said, even a bad deal is better than no deal. I do not agree. Boris Dillevue, 1725 Huntington Road. That's it.
Thank you. Council comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Klein.
I have 4 comments tonight. The first is a thank you. I would like to thank our police department and most especially Officer Frine and Lieutenant Bose for allowing me to ride along on third shift Friday night. That was, I have to tell you, an eye-opener. Friendly officers all the way around. And when it got time to be serious, they were serious and very professional. I was reminded of that old movie, While You Were Sleeping, was the title of it. And I kept thinking, it's in the middle of the night here in Waterloo. And while everyone is sleeping, these people go out there and risk it all. It's just amazing to me that people are still willing to do that. So my thanks, my deep thanks to all of those people. Now, the next thing I want to mention is I got a phone call this week from a lovely lady by the name of Lula Davis, who lives on East 4th Street, and she watches faithfully every Monday night. And she is concerned that now that we are headed into budget time, that we don't raise taxes. She does not want her taxes raised. And I said to her, you're the first person to officially call me. I've heard it through the neighborhoods, but to call me up and have a long conversation about it. She's very concerned about the high taxes in our city. And of course, then the third thing is and hi Lula, by the way, she's watching now. The third thing is the Williston Street house is still not down. I drove by it today on my way home from walking in the wards. It's still not down. They've pulled the trees out of there, but it's still hanging there, that house. And now that the trees are gone, you can certainly see the terrible condition that the house is in. We discussed this last time, I believe, or maybe even the time before that. The contract has been let. We're just waiting for that company to take it down. We need to call them up and really get on them. The neighbors are appalled by that house, and I don't blame them. And of course, the last thing that I want to mention is I see where the courts, the Black Hawk County courts, are going to open up again. I believe that we should open up again. I got a call this week from a gentleman who said he has seen a lot of us out in the community, either at restaurants or at sporting events or even bars. And he said, if you people can do that, and he knows that, few of us work jobs. And he said, if you can all do that, You can come back and have it in chambers where people who are not technologically savvy can come. People who prefer to come and see us in person. And for those who have health issues, they can Zoom from home. So can't we do it, Mayor? Can't we come back next time to chambers?
Yeah,
Thank you for your comments, Mrs. Klein. No, give us an update on the Williston Street house.
Thank you, Mayor. Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. We can definitely give them a call in the morning. Remember, this is a Rackham demo, so they do have to look at weather conditions for making sure that the asbestos materials are not friable and in the air. So they can't have it too cold because they'll be using water to weigh it down as they do the demolition to avoid any dust. And obviously, they can't have it raining so that they could get in there and hammer things before that they can do it in a proper manner. So we'll give them a call in the morning and see. I know that they're normally looking at a 3 or 4 day window for the forecast for favorable weather, but we'll push them as much as we can to get it done right away.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, we had our work session today, and the work session in that we talked about, and Chief Fitzgerald talked about GATSO funds. And one of the things that struck me was that there is a plan to increase those by 10 cameras. And if I'm not mistaken, when originally this was brought up, the whole concept, which was voted on by the council, was for 13 of those cameras. So I'm just questioning whether the council does not have to approve an additional 10 cameras going in there. Secondly, talking about GATSO funds, and if this would go into where there were 10 additional cameras put up with GATSO funding and revenue coming from that, I would like to see, and I'm calling again and asking that some of that money be used for enforcement of the fireworks ordinance when that comes back at us again, because we know it will, and there needs to be more enforcement of that. The people of Waterloo want that, and we could use some of that money for that, I believe. And the last thing is use some of that money also for code enforcement. They don't get money back from all the different kind of ticketing and enforcement that they do. And I believe that some of that money should come back to them to give them a few more enforcement officers to make code enforcement even more effective. They're dealing with bare bones staff, and it needs to increase. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Kelly, can you send Mr. Morrissey a copy of the signed ordinance that we have for that, for the traffic cameras?
Yep,
All
I
right.
can do that.
Thank you.
Thank
Is there
you.
anyone else?
anyone else?
No, Ms. Jewin.
Okay, motion to close public comments, receive comments, and place on file.
Second.
All right, that motion was made with a couple seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
Motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition to 1A1 being twofold. Bill payments for January 25th, 2021 in the amount of $1,900,970.51, and bill payment for February 1st, 2021 in the amount of $3,323,077.32. Move to receive, approve, and place on file.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second. Council, any convo or anything?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey?
Yeah, I'd like to take some off for discussion. First of all is 1A 5 Next is number 8 or number 9. I guess wouldn't need to do 8, just do 9. Number 10. That's 1A10. And then the next one is 1A12. Next is 1B, number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7.
All right, any other items, council? So, Madam Clerk, all but the items listed by Mr. Morrissey, and I do have them written.
All right, Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
and Mrs. Jewin.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
like to make a motion to approve 1A 5, and that is resolution approving completion of project and recommendation of acceptance of work for work performed by Midwest Concrete Incorporated of Peosta, Iowa, at a total cost of $319,425.60 in conjunction with the fiscal year 2021 sidewalk repair assessment program, Zone 10, contract number 1018, and receive and file a 2-year maintenance bond.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, the question that I have in this, and I wish that, first of all, as a preface to that, I wish that we didn't have to remove these things, but were somehow able to just, when the motion is made to approve it, that we just start talking about the ones that we have questions about for the public's sake and for the council's sake and for brevity's sake, but can't do that according to our rules of procedure that we have. So anyway, so the question I have with this is how much of this cost for repair in the sidewalk is due to uneven and non-fractured sidewalk squares?
Jamie, are you on, or Wayne?
Jamie Knudsen, city engineer. I apologize, Mr. Morrissey. I have no way of knowing that's going to take a large amount of staff time to go through all the individual forms and go back and look at them. So I don't have that information readily available.
So is there a way to get that information then?
It's going to take a fair amount of staff time to go back through the thousands of individual forms, because we have to go look at each form and try to determine, I assume you're asking if they can be mud jacked, but we would have to take a look at each individual form. And even then, I'm not entirely sure we would be able to tell if they would be able to be mud jacked or not necessarily.
Well, I'm just requesting that information.
Well, you know what? To request that type of information, I need to hear that from every council person. You know, once we began this process, so when we get ready to do zone 11 next year, whatever one, then if you want that type of information, that's something that may be added to one of the forms. But to have them go through thousands of individual places for, you know, to push it up through for mud jacking, which the council has already voted against. I'm not going to waste staff time. I'm not saying waste. I'm not going to have staff do that unless I have a majority of council members to change up staff priority like that to do that.
Well, I'm leaving my request still there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey.
Okay, so that's all I had on that one, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. So we have a motion on that item, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Boyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
and Mr. Bozen.
Yes.
Thank you. I think it's 189, sir.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the following is a resolution approving completion of project and recommendation of acceptance of work for work performed by Aspro Incorporated of Waterloo, Iowa in the amount of $3,580,544.71 in conjunction with the fiscal year 2020 street reconstruction program contract number 993 and receive and file a 2-year maintenance bond.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. It's your floor, Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, my question here is I would like to get what streets were completed and what streets did not get done according to the schedule we had, and how COVID-19 and what we had discussed several times before about how that would impact our ability to do all of this work.
So you want to know which streets were completed in the 2020 reconstruction program?
Yes, as far as what this $3.5 million is paying for, and if it was impacted at all because of the discussion we've had in the past about COVID-19 and possible lack of funds.
So Jamie, I know you have to have a list of completed projects.
Yes, Jamie Knudsen, city engineer. All of the projects that were, or all of the streets that were in this project were completed by ASPRO this fall. There were no issues, and I can certainly send that list out to council if they would like that. And this project was not impacted by COVID as far as funding is concerned.
So all the streets for the 2020 reconstruction program are completed?
For this project, there is still one that's in another reconstruction. We had 2 reconstruction projects for 2020. One of them was an asphalt one with ASPRO, and that one is completed. The other one was a concrete one with Lodge Construction, and those streets are done except for the sidewalk and a few other things on Cortlandt Street. And that'll get finished up here in the spring and be brought to council for acceptance at that point.
All right. So what's in here is only what's been completed?
Correct. For the contract just for ASPRO, yes.
All right. Thank you. There's a motion, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Boyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
and Mr. Amos.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion adopting a resolution approving completion of project and recommendation of acceptance of work for work performed by Peters Construction Corp. of Waterloo, Iowa at the total cost of $951,547.33 in conjunction with the Five Sullivan Brothers Convention Center Exhibition Hall ceiling renovation project and authorizing the mayor to execute said document.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. Mr. Morrissey?
And my whole point of bringing this up is I would like it discussed so that the public heard exactly what this $951,000 is paying for, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Is that Michelle or Noel?
I can definitely answer. Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. So this was for the renovation of the exhibit hall ceiling. I have Nathan Compton on the line as well if you'd like more details as to how they basically had to tear out parts of the existing ceiling and put in the new one.
I would, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I would appreciate that, and I think the public would too, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Nathan,
Sir.
are you on?
I am. Yep, happy to talk about it. So
State your name and who you're affiliated with, sir.
Nathan Compton, architect with ISG Architecture and Engineering Group. We did the architecture and engineering for that project, which involved If you recall, the existing exhibit hall ceiling had peeling paint and was an unfinished space. We went in there, we added some structural support, and then added a new ceiling throughout the space, which consisted of a bulkhead that went around the perimeter and broke the space up into 5 quadrants, and then also with a drywall bulkhead. And then we also added a structural acoustical ceiling tile grid system that allows for some hanging of different equipment for events such as the pool tournament and the dart tournament. For example, at the pool tournament, they will hang lights down for the pool tables. So this helps support that. In addition to all of that, there is a multicolored LED lighting system that is in there that creates a better flexibility for the different kinds of events that occur within that space. There was also some duct work that happened with that, some rework of the duct and some rework of some fire systems also that occurred with that project.
All right.
Thank you.
And we probably, I know the Sydney with the Courier have reached out, so we'll probably do a larger story about it, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. But we also may need a work session or so to take a look at the incredible work that's taking place, because it'll be something we can all be proud of. But we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Boyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
and Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
All right, thank you. 1812, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion adopting a resolution accepting a grant from the Blackhawk County Gaming Association for the Convention Center Phase 3 renovations in the amount of $820,000, requiring matching funds of $1,500,000, and authorizing the mayor to execute said documents.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. It's on you, good sir.
Well, again, this is, I think, a question that goes back out again as to what is this going to do? If the public could hear what this is going to do.
Michelle, I see you're off mute.
Yep. This is Michelle Weidner, Chief Financial Officer. Yes, we applied for a grant with gaming to help with phase 3 of the convention center improvements, and we're very excited that we were awarded the grant. We are going to replace the sign outside that you see driving by. We will replace the plaza in a way to honor the Sullivan family. And we will also be able to renovate the interior of the second floor, which none of those projects were able to be included in previous phases. So we're very excited to get that done. And I did want to share, I think the community will be really excited when they see the ceiling in the exhibit hall, because it does look very nice.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Boyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
and Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
All right, thank you. 1B4, Mr. Morrissey.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, again, I wish that, can we just take 4, 5, 6, and 7 together? I'd like to make a motion to approve number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 7 on the consent agenda list, as stated, authorizing the mayor to execute each of those said documents, if I could do that way. I just would like to have the public hear explanations for each one of these, Mr. Mayor. Is that out of line, Kelly, or
Can we get a second?
Second.
All right, the motion has been made with the second. Noel, if you want to retouch up on 4, 6, and 7, we know that we've already put some of these projects out. So could you just catch the public up again and council as well?
Sure, and I can probably just turn it over to Nathan to talk about. Nathan, I don't know if you have an agenda in front of you. The first one is the structural drawings, additional steel members for the corner of the existing roof framing, the ceiling height changes, cost for gypsum board assemblies, and then the as-built drawings where we just changed the scope of what was needed with no cost.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to, this is Nathan again with ISG Architecture. Sorry, I didn't see what the agenda items were. Could you tell me what
number four is change order number 2 for a net increase of 5 Sullivan Brothers Convention Center addition and renovation project.
Okay.
Number 6 is Cardinal for an increase of $753 for an addition and project. And number 7 is a change order. Number 6 was Peters
Okay.
Construction for no increase in conjunction with the hall ceiling.
Okay. So for the first one, for the 5 Sullivan Brothers, for the structural, for the 7,615, as we got into the addition renovation project, one of the pieces of that project is adding cutting back some of the structure at 5 Sullivan Brothers Convention Center and adding some panels up there. As we dove into the actual construction of that, it turned out that the construction of that structure was done in 2 different ways, depending on which side of the building you were on. And we had it detailed in one fashion that addressed half of the structure, and another portion, the other half of the structure, turned out to have a different connecting piece. And so we had to do a revision to that detail to make sure that everything was structurally support up there. So we had to add a little angle up there at each of the structural members that was on 2 sides of the building. So that is what that piece is for. For the ceiling height change, that one was for the 753 was due to once we opened up the ceiling, we discovered some issues with all the different various things that have gone on up there. We had investigated it previously, but there was even more up there than what we had realized, and it required the duct work to be lowered a little bit. We weren't able to hold it up as high as we thought we could, which required us to rework some of the ceiling. And so the cost comes in with some additional bulkheads, which are just metal framing and drywall to help close off that ceiling a little bit better. And then what was the third one you mentioned? That one was for...
There was no increase on I think Noel already touched on that one.
Okay.
So basically you got a 40, 50-year-old building, patchwork here and there, found out different things, done different ways, and you had to go in and address those things.
Correct. That's a great way to sum it up.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Mr. Morrison, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, number 5 was about the truck.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Randy, sorry about that.
Randy Bennett, Public Works Division Manager. What this is doing is on the original drawings, it showed that we had a vent in our chemical room, which was at the bottom. But when we did our walkthrough, we actually needed one on the top as well to get proper ventilation. So that's what's addressing the 16 by 12 opening. And then when it comes to replacing the PVC water line and rerouting it with Schedule 40, when we had the original drawings, one of the things that we had to take in consideration is where our radiant heating was. So the way the plastic water line was running across, it was kind of putting undue pressure on it in some of the joints, and we were feared that it was going to leak. So we ended up having to reroute that and go with the galvanized because of how the brackets had to work for that. But as you can see, it's no increase to the total project amount.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
and Mr. Foyce.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Could someone take number 2?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof of publication of notice of public hearing on the fiscal year 2021 Green Belt Lake REAP Grant Project, contract number 1042.
Second.
The
Second.
motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now open. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Morrissey.
I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now closed. And I'm sorry, Kelly, there were no comments on file, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution confirming approval of plan specifications, form of contract, et cetera, and authorizing to proceed.
Second. Second.
A motion has been made with second. Council, any questions? Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
and Mr. Greider.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to receive, file, and instruct city clerk to read bids and refer to Leisure Services Director for further review.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Madam Clerk?
All right, our first bidder was Boulder Contracting of Grundy Center, Iowa. They provided 5% security. Their bid amount was $252,150. The alternate bid was $50,000. Our second bidder is Taylor Construction Incorporated of New Vienna, Iowa. They provided 5% security. Their bid amount is $473,000. The alternate is $95,000. Third bidder and final bidder is Peterson Contractors Incorporated of Rhinebeck, Iowa. They provided 5% security. Their bid amount is $314,101.22. Their alternate is $100,000.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Could someone take number 3, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Amos.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof of publication of notice of public hearing, and that is a request by the City of Waterloo to rezone approximately 39 acres from A1 Agricultural District to M-2P Planned Industrial District located east of 2971 Independence Avenue.
Second.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now open. Kelly, are there any comments on file?
No comments on file.
Are there any questions from anybody tuning in?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing and recommendation of approval of the Planning, Programming, and Zoning Commission.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now closed.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to receive, file, and consider and pass for the first time an ordinance amending ordinance number 5079 as amended City of Waterloo zoning ordinance by amending the official zoning map referred to in section 10-4-4 to rezone approximately 39 acres from A1 Agricultural District to M-2P Planned Industrial District located east of 2971 Independence Avenue.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Foyce?
thank you. Could we have Noel just give us kind of an overview on this, please?
Mr. Anderson?
Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. This is part of the land the city acquired from Willard Frost a number of years back. Essentially, the northern portion of the lot was already zoned M2P. The southern portion was zoned A1. The total area the city owns right in this area is 78 acres contiguous. We think it's a good site for redevelopment or for development, being next to Ferguson and of course being along MLK and Independence. We recently showed it to a prospect. One of the questions on theirs was it already rezoned? So we're moving ahead with having that action done ahead of time since the surrounding land around it, except for a few homes in the trailer court, are already zoned industrially. So we're just moving ahead to have the site ready for that and continue the industrial development of the area.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Well, it made some of us smile.
Because you yelled at me.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
No, hold on. That motion has been made. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
And Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Now, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Motion's been made with the second. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
No.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
And Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to consider and pass for the second and third times and adopt said ordinance.
Second.
Motion has been made with the second. Madam Clerk?
Can I ask, are there any objections at all that have been filed on this? Have we heard anything from the house and the trailer that's there?
No, was there any objections during the planning meeting or?
No, there was not.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
All right. Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
And Mr. Amos?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Number 4, someone.
Mr. Mayor?
Who's that? Mr. Foyce.
I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof of publication of notice of public hearing, and that is for a lease agreement with Enterprise Leasing of Waterloo, Iowa to lease 23 vehicles for police, administrative, and investigative staff.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second. The hearing is open. Mrs. Felkley, do we have any people here that want to comment?
We do. Our first person on the list of public comment is Diamond Campbell.
Diamond, are you with us?
She was here earlier.
All right. Who's next, Kelly? Mrs. Felkley.
We've got, I go by both. We've got Jody Forschler.
All right. Miss Horschler, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm here. I am here simply to answer questions if need be from the council.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Kelly, who else is with us?
That's it for this item.
Okay. All right. So no public comment. Mr. Foyce?
Sorry. Jump back. I would like to make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
The motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving a recurring master equity lease agreement with Enterprise Leasing of Waterloo, Iowa to lease 23 vehicles for police, administrative, and investigative staff, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
A motion has been made with a second. Pretty sure we got questions on this. Council,
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Bozen.
just a couple of questions. When I got correspondence, we all got a correspondence from our CFO, and we got a correspondence from Chief Fitzgerald. And one of my main questions was how are we going to fund this first year? And it would be funded at a reduced rate because we're selling our investigative vehicles, and we seem to be at odds on where that funding was going to come from. And I guess we're at odds on accounting practices. So I would like to just hear where the additional funding is going to come from for these vehicles. And then secondly, if I could, I would like to see this, and I hope it is, that this agreement comes before council each and every year if it's passed, for us to vote on it or recertify it each year.
Okay. All right. The recertification portion, I'm not sure. Is that, Kelly, do you know about that portion, or Chief, or anyone?
Could you ask the question about recertification again? Maybe I misheard.
Council votes on it every year.
I would think that since it's an item that we would have to renew every year, since it wouldn't be more than one 12-month program, that we would just bring it up again, and at the end of the 12-month, well, we probably bring it up to you well in advance of that to have it ready to go at the 12-month mark. So I would think yes.
Okay. And then the other question was how it's going to be funded this first year. I understand the sales of the vehicles are going to assist in the first year funding, and then how it's going to pay for itself year after year. But I'm just curious on the initial funding for this year.
Our salary savings for the unfilled positions that we have now can accommodate for the difference.
And the reason I ask that is because the two different memos that we received, one from our CFO and one from you, had stark differences in funding was available in those line items. So I'm just curious from Michelle, or I understand your point on the salary line items, but I'd like to hear from our CFO if how she feels about the funding mechanism too.
Michelle Wiedner, Chief Financial Officer. So I had communicated with Major Leibold as of the end of December, the salary savings, and actually since that time I have seen one journal entry come through allocating salaries to grants, but they're actually overspent on salaries at the end of December. So I know someone said there will be vacancies coming up, but I haven't seen the numbers. So that's why I responded the way I did. I don't have that specific information for you yet.
Well, there are definitely vacancies. I would agree with Ms. Wiedner on that, but there are definitely salary savings because we, have had retirements. In addition to those retirements, there's CARES funding that should account for overtime and other costs. So I would hope that we're not conflating the numbers by including overtime costs and non-salary items that wouldn't apply here to just the straight salary line item.
Michelle Wiedner, Chief Financial Officer again. We typically find that when police have vacancies, their overtime line it increases dramatically. And I think as of the end of December, they had used about 85% of the overtime line. So it does, we do have to account for that somehow because it has to be paid for. So I would still like to see the calculations or the dates that we have for vacancies and how much overtime we're going to need for the balance of the year to really understand where that funding will come from.
I just ask council to understand that in a year of COVID and coronavirus that we were given monies to offset a lot of the additional overtime costs that you would see right now. So that overtime cost should be supplanted in a sense by funding that we get from the state and federal government. With that, any normalized overtime cost, if we were to look at it in traditional overtime cost, I'm sure we wouldn't be even close to that percentage. And we would not also have the benefit of having another funding mechanism for the overtime that has needed to be used. I mean, this year was a different year. I think we would all agree. And with that being said, I don't think that overtime cost should be a consideration for purposes of what we'd like to move forward with and how we would calculate the savings. We agree that there has been vacancies. Those vacancies were signed off on by, they were sent through finance and they were sent through our chain of command here in the city. So there's no secret that we both have had vacancies and will have vacancies over the next few months. With that being said, we know that we just hired 4 new folks. They haven't started yet. So there's 4 vacancies right there that we've just, I shouldn't say we've just hired. We put them in the process for medical background. So we know that we have 4 vacancies. How we cannot compute that those 4 vacancies don't exist is beyond me.
Chief, what is the what's the amount that's needed to start up again with this program? The difference?
There is a difference of about $60,000 in operation funds.
So we're talking about 60,000.
Major Leibold, do you have the exact number?
It'll obviously, Major Leibold Water Police, it'll obviously depend on trade-in values, but we are somewhere between 60 and probably between 50 and 70,000. I'd say 60 is a safe estimate.
I found that it was $56,432.
All right. So 56K made up in salaries and other areas. So, anything else, Mr. Bozen?
No, sir. Those are the questions that I've got answered. I appreciate it.
Right. Anyone? Mr. Morrissey?
Yeah. First of all, I wonder why we're doing this now rather than just waiting until our budget discussions come up. Secondly, I know that our chief financial officer sent out a memo to us outlining 3 different options. And I would like to hear from her and have her explain those 3 different routes to go with this, or possible routes to go with it. And I'm quite a bit concerned about the fact that there's a difference of opinion when it comes to the person who is overlooking the money strings for every department in the city of Waterloo, and the chief of the largest department's budget. That's concerning to me. So there's 3 things I have there, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mrs. Wiedner. Mrs. Wiedner.
You're muted.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. Michelle Wiedner, Chief Financial Officer, let me pull up the alternatives. I will speak to the vacancies. The vacancies I'm being told are future. So while the savings may be coming, I don't have a way to know that today. I did request some information. Accountants like details, and I don't have that. So I'm not trying to badmouth anything. I didn't say there might not be future vacancies, but there's 2 variables in play. Actually 3. When people retire, they generally have payouts, and that takes a little bit to recover from in the budget to cover those payouts before we can move on to hiring. And number 2, overtime is an issue, and I understand why. There's services they have to provide, whether they have full-time bodies or not. So overtime is part of the budget. I can't speak to the CARES money because the way that we record grants, that's recorded separately, and I'm not even talking about grants. I'm talking about our regular property tax funded salary budget. So with that said, I'm looking for the memo, and of course, when you want something, you can't find it. Here we go. I had suggested, because the city has not done this before, I think we all know that. We've talked about the fact that leasing is basically a financing tool for acquiring assets. It likely will be debt. You know, we are going to get vehicles to drive, but as I understand it, we are going to be selling them in a year, which implies that we own them, and we're going to be able to sell them for more than the debt balance at that time. And that's the revenue that we're talking about using to pay for the next year's vehicles. So as long as the resale price holds where Enterprise anticipates it to be today, that will work out well. But we all know there are many unknowns in this world, and we don't know, particularly we have a new administration. I can't speak to what regulations may come into effect with vehicles that may change that. So I did suggest 3 things that council might want to consider. First, do what the police are asking today to acquire all the requested vehicles outside our regular capital improvements program. I think everyone's on council anyway is familiar that we typically handle capital purchases, including equipment, through the capital improvements annual program rather than operations throughout the year for general vehicles. Now, that's not necessarily true for enterprise funds, business funds such as sewer and garbage, but for the general fund, of which police is part, that's how we would generally do that. And I did make some suggestions about once we have the funding identified, if they do, because one of the risks that you have as a city if you do this is if those vehicles get wrecked during the year, or if we have had them before, I hope we don't again, but a major hailstorm, the vehicles, if they're damaged when you go to resell them, chances are the price will be lower. And I'm certainly not in a position to say how much lower. We may still make money on it. I don't know. I just feel it's my job to make you aware of the risks that you're taking as you make this decision. They are requesting a lot of vehicles in this. And in fact, they're requesting more than they're even selling. So that's a lot to do. I do have concerns if something should happen down the road in year 3 and this program doesn't happen to work any longer, how does the city make sure those employees still have vehicles to drive? So another option would be to just do a trial of this program, maybe do half of the vehicles this year, and let's see how the program works before we do 23 vehicles, because that is a large number of vehicles. And my last option was to include them in the traditional capital improvements process as we normally would. That doesn't mean we can't still do the enterprise purchase. I'm just suggesting it's a capital purchase and it should probably go through the capital program planning process. And those are just some options that I threw out for council's consideration. And I can see the chief shaking his head at me, and that's okay. We can disagree. So
let's just stick to the
those are my points.
stick to the comments. Chief, you have a response?
I do. I think there is many of an assumption with the aforementioned statements that our finance director made. One of which is that there will be some kind of Titanic storm that hits every vehicle when we don't have a history of vehicles being wrecked or damaged in that manner. Even if we did, we would have to replace those vehicles nonetheless. And if after year 3 and we do these year by year individually, we do not like the program, we will sell the vehicles and we will have more than enough money to buy new vehicles that are better than the vehicles we traded in the first place. This is a it's close to a no-brainer as one might like to say. And that's why I wrote such a detailed response. I think if you look at the accounting principles, we can we can go either way. And I think that the bottom line is we need less than $60,000. We have the money in our salary line items. We have the money in abandoned funds. We have the money in CARES funds. There are several sources we can use to make this money up. And it allows us the opportunity to refresh not only the vehicles that we have, and we can sell the incumbent vehicles, the ones that are going, let's not lose sight of the fact we would be selling 19 vehicles, gaining 23. And in the end of the first year, anyone that knows anything about trading in trucks and vehicles knows that the truck market has been high. It's not been a market that's fluctuated much, so that risk is mitigated some. And we're not overspent, basically, on our salary line items. When you look at salary line items, and Michelle, our finance director brought in another point, and that is, what are we saving line item wise for retirements? Well, that is part of a line item, a separate line item, not just your salary line item. That should be its own line item that's budgeted every year, because every year you'll have a retirement. Every year you should be able to forecast how many people that you think may be retiring, and that money should be set aside outside of the salary line item to account for that. So we do have some disagreement as to how the financials should be handled. However, the one thing we can't disagree on is that we have officers, for example, overseas deployed that are not draining the salary line item, and we do have 4 people in the process of being hired now, and we couldn't have those 4 people in the process of being hired now if we did not have vacancies. Again, we have the money to support this and seed this program, and it makes sense.
Thank you, Chief. Council, other questions?
Mr. Mayor, just as a follow-up, I just don't feel comfortable. I want to hear a report from our chief financial officer on the feasibility and the reliability that there is with the numbers so that the city can afford this without overspending. So, and I don't hear our chief financial officer telling me that right now. And that's no disrespect to Chief Fitzgerald or Major Leibold. I want to hear from her the numbers, her to crunch the numbers and come back. And I believe that now's not the time to vote on this. Therefore, I make a motion to postpone this until such time as we get a more complete report from our chief financial officer, Mr. Mayor. I make that motion to postpone to a later date. Say, I don't know how long it would take Michelle to get that report back to us.
So what report? I'm trying to think of this report because we've had a couple work sessions and we've been talking about this for months. And the numbers was mentioned that this is new territory for us. We haven't done. We're not doing the entire fleet. We're talking about a portion of vehicles. So what report do you want that we've had time to get out to us that you currently don't have right now? Because they have crunched the numbers on the other side, but what report? That's what I'm just asking.
I want to alleviate my concerns that I have regarding the information that was just given by our chief financial officer.
You want her to say yes or no? She's in support of this or not?
No, I didn't say that, Mr. Mayor. I said that I want to hear from her if she believes that this is a good investment on the part of the city, given the numbers that she has in front as far as the dollars being there to pay for this. Because she herself has come up with 3 different alternatives or 3 options. And I just think that this needs to be a statement from our chief financial officer as to the financial status that this has going into us approving this, because this is a big investment, Mr. Mayor. And
Mr. Mayor, we need a
Yes, go ahead.
second on that motion.
Is there a second? All right, the motion fails for a lack of second.
Mr. Mayor, may I add a comment, since this is Michelle Weidner, Chief Financial Officer, since he's asking, I think, a question of me. I don't have that information. I think it might be appropriate to ask the police department if they can commit to making sure they have those savings in personnel by the end of the year. Because I had to go with the information that I had, which was the end of December, and it's not there yet. And I don't, they know what they're going to spend in salaries, hopefully. And overtime is always a guess, but we do have to count it. So I think that it would be more appropriate to have that commitment from them. I don't think I can control that, I guess I'm saying.
How about if the police department doesn't have it, they just don't do the project? Because they have to come up with the money, correct?
I can tell you, we certainly won't have it in July when we restart the budget and salary savings don't exist. So we need to do this now. That's my answer.
All right. So Mr. Morrissey,
yes, Mr. Mayor.
$56,000. Council, any other questions? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, Mr. Bozen, I'm sorry.
I apologize. I just have one thing everyone else has done. And each year in the CIP, we've been putting in for cruisers and an investigative vehicle. We haven't purchased an investigative vehicle since 2017. If this breaks even, great. If this loses $22,500 a year, that's the cost of the investigative vehicle that we're budgeting in CIP every year. And I still think we're money ahead. I believe it's a good program. I'd like to see it go forward. But like I said, if it breaks even or makes money, great. Even if we lose a little bit of money, I still think we're ahead based on what we budget each year for investigative vehicles. And then we end up not purchasing them because we end up having to put that money into squads because of damage and accidents and things that happen to them. That's all I've got, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bozen. Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
No.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey.
No.
Thank you. Number 5, please.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Amos.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof of publication of notice of public hearing. And that is the sale and conveyance of city-owned property located south of 1246 Martin Road to IPE 1031 REV 279 LLC Cardinal Construction, and to approve the Fourth Amendment to a development agreement to convey additional land and award 4 years of 50% tax rebates for the expansion construction of a shared detention pond system.
Second.
Motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the hearing is now open. Are there any comments or any comments on file, or does anyone have any thing to say about this project? Going a second time.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
This motion was made to close. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now closed.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion adopting a resolution authorizing the sale and conveyance of city-owned property located south of 1246 Martin Road to IPE 1031 REV 279 LLC in the amount of $1 and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. council questions, anyone? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
and Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion adopting a resolution approving a development agreement to include additional rebates of 4 years at 50% for a shared detention system and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. Any other questions? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
and Mr. Foyce.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Could someone take number 6, please?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to receive and file proof of publication of notice of public hearing for the sale and conveyance of city-owned property located at the northwest corner of Beach Street and Webster Street to Walter and Kelly Reed for $1,738.80 with a development agreement.
Second.
The motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now open. Are there any comments on file?
There's no comments on file, but we do have Walter Reed on the Zoom call to make comments.
Mr. Reed, could you state your name and address for the record and let us know your thoughts, sir? Are you there, Mr. Reed? I think you got to hit your mute button. All right, well, no, well, I'll wait till there's comments by staff and council. So, all right, motion to close this hearing.
Make a motion to close the hearing?
Wait, I think, wait, there's already been made, right?
Not yet. I'd like to make close the hearing.
I think I hit my peak right now, and I just can't. So we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now closed.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the sale and conveyance of city-owned property located south of 1213 Beach Street to Walter and Kelly Reed in the amount of $1,738.80 and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said documents.
Second.
A motion has been made. Second.
Can we
Mrs.
get an
Stewart,
overview on this from Mr. Anderson, please?
Mr. Anderson.
Cole Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. We're glad to be working with the Reeds on the sale of this property. This was a 657A house that we had acquired and demolished. The Reeds have relatives abutting the lot, so they are interested in acquiring this for future redevelopment of the site. Essentially, to determine the price for the sale of property, again, we have to follow the state code for selling property in a proper manner based on the values and the benefits to the city of Waterloo. So we took the assessed value of the lot at about $3,640. We looked at the improvements that they're making in the fencing. Plus we looked at nearby parcels that were assessed the same in the amount of additional taxes we would receive. According to the sale of property policy, this is located within the CURA, so they get 8 years worth of taxes to count against that. And it lowered the price down to the sales price of $1,738.80. So the development agreement would approve selling it to them for that amount based on those numbers and with them putting up the fencing.
Right. We're maintaining that lot too?
We are maintaining that lot right now.
Okay. And that goes onto the tax rolls now?
That would be correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Any other questions? Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Bozen,
Yes.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
and Mr. Greider.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Could someone take 7, 8, and 9, please?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I need to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving a development agreement and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second. I think I need a V8. Madam Clerk.
I didn't know people still drank those.
I need something.
Mr. Bozen. Mr. Bozen.
Yes.
Mr. Amos.
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Foyce.
Yes.
Mr. Greider.
Yes.
And Mrs. Jewin.
Yes.
There we go. All right. 7, 8, 9, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Greider.
I'd like to make following motions to adopt the following resolutions. Resolution 7 is adopting a face mask mandate for the city of Waterloo. Number 8 is a resolution approving an agreement with De Novo Marketing LLC of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to provide consulting services and guide the 2030 Waterloo Community Vision and Strategic Plan in the amount of $50,000 and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document. And number 9 is a resolution approving the Convention and Visitors Bureau Board recommendation for funding of hotel motel mini grant applications for the Iowa Boys Girls State Bowling Tournament in the amount of $3,000 and the Cedar Valley Invitational Collegiate Bowling Tournament in the amount of $1,000.
Second.
A motion has been made with the second. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Greider.
So once again, we have the face mask resolution before us. And I know that we're all very tired of this, and I get it. I am very tired of wearing them as well. However, I do firmly believe that we need to extend this for another 12 weeks for a variety of reasons. One, we need to do this for our neighbors as we roll out the vaccination schedule that will hopefully be ramping up thanks to the hard work of our County Board of Health, our County Health Department, and our partners on a state and federal level, but we still need to mask up for them. In addition, we just heard yesterday that the state of Iowa reported our single largest day number of deaths. They weren't all yesterday, but 250 Iowans have lost their lives. This is on top of a national number that surpasses the total casualties of Americans during World War II. So COVID-19 is still with us. It is still deadly. In addition, we just found out through the Iowa Department of Public Health that the B117 variant, which is more transmissible and potentially more deadly, has been found in 2 counties here in eastern Iowa, in Johnson and Bremer County, and those are not linked to any sort of international or interstate travel. So COVID-19 is here. We are dealing with new mutations as we also work to get everyone vaccinated. So it's very, very important that we continue this neighborly action of masking up and helping keep everyone in this community as healthy as we can until we finally beat this virus, which I know will happen as we get through this year. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Greider. Council, Mr. Bozen.
Thank you, sir. I applaud what the health department's doing, but they can only do so much with how many vaccines they work. And we got a long road ahead of us just getting people 65 and older when we're allocating 600 and we got 20,000 people to give the vaccine to. It's going to take forever. I personally would just like to see the 12 weeks removed and just say indefinitely until the mayor moves forward with rescinding your emergency order on the COVID itself. I think just keep coming back every 3 months, every 8 weeks or whatever. It's just I wouldn't say it's a waste of time because I think it's a very important issue. But I truly believe that we should just leave the date open, make it indefinite, and leave it up to you and the health department when you guys feel that it's appropriate to remove this mandate. So I personally would like to make an amendment to this to remove the 12 weeks ending date. And as I just stated, that it would be up to the mayor and the health department working together to determine when we end the mask mandate.
Second.
Okay. Motion's made that, so to extend it and leave it open, you want, that's on the table. Any conversation about that?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Greider?
as the primary author, I'm more than happy with that. You know, when I initially proposed this resolution back in August of last year, which seems a million years ago, I wanted us to be flexible to adjust to the times that we were living in. We didn't have a specific end date or even a vaccine at that point. So I'm fine with this new amendment because we understand that now with new vaccines rolling out, another 2 potentially getting FDA approval this month or next month, there is light at the end of the tunnel, even if it's maybe not right here for us, given the number of vaccines we're getting. So I'm very comfortable with that amendment, given where we are at with the COVID-19 situation here in Waterloo and the Black Hawk County.
And so what we do with this, we have our a COVID response team internally that takes a look at every entire department, that also communicates with the CDC, that also communicates with the public health department. So at the end of all of those times, right before we get ready to issue a mandate or council asks to bring it forward, we actually go and do the due diligence of talking to all of those people, taking a look at the numbers and seeing if we need to continue. So we do it anyway. And so if that changes or the numbers change or the data changes, then we'll just come back to you and say it's that time. So we look at science and stats when we make that decision. Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, I am in favor of the amendment as proposed by Mr. Boesen. I just wish that we would have done it sooner. We wouldn't have to revisit this like we are even now. The hope for thing with this amendment, approval of this amendment, is that at such time as you, Mr. Mayor, and the Black Hawk County Health Department are in agreement that resolution to terminate this mandate would be brought back to the council for approval, I take it. That would be part of this amendment, the understanding in passing it, I believe. Am I correct in saying that?
No.
What? I asked the mayor that.
My understanding.
I asked the mayor that, Sharon, please.
Can you repeat that for me, Mr. Morrissey?
My understanding would be that this would be indefinite, pending an agreement between you and the health department officials in Black Hawk County or the state that we could end the mask mandate, and that would then come back to the council.
Well, it depends who you ask, because if you ask the state will probably say no mask mandate, which is in complete opposite of what you would propose. And if you ask the health department, you'll get another statement. So before anything is done, I would have a conversation with the city council and just say, hey, this is what we're looking at. We have, all of our healthcare providers vaccinated. Our numbers are down to very small numbers. We're not seeing outbreaks in schools or in other places. And I would just bring that back to all of you with data. So, but they're giving the mayor the authority to, instead of having to come back every couple weeks, Mr. Boesen, every couple months, just having the authority to extend it as long as we need to. It could be shorter than 12 months, right? We could, but they're giving the authority to me to decide when to end it. But I'm telling you, I would not end it without talking to the council first.
So my question again, Mr. Mayor, is if I understand Councilman Bozen's amendment, which was seconded and which we're discussing right now, is that the mask mandate, if we approve this right now, would be in effect indefinitely until such time as you and the health department felt that it could be ended. That's my understanding of what Mr. Bozen said. So beyond that, if that discussion takes place and there is that agreement between those two entities, would a resolution then be brought back to the council to terminate this mask mandate, which is legislative action taken by the council? Would that not have to happen?
I didn't hear Mr. Bozen saying that the health department needs to call the city of Waterloo and tell us.
That's not what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Bozen, can you respond what your amendment is to Mr. Morrissey?
I was making an amendment to end the cutoff date and have it indefinite when the mayor deems it's appropriate to end the mask mandate. And I would hope that he would utilize the health department and other sources. And he mentioned that he'll be utilizing his COVID response team and all the information and data that he'll need to make that decision. But we have an emergency proclamation that the mayor enacted. And I believe that he can, with the data and the information that he has, make that decision to end the mask mandate. It could be less than 12 weeks. We could be extending it another 12 weeks. So we're looking at 24 weeks. But I believe that we should give him that authority so this doesn't have to keep coming back before council.
Mr. Mayor.
Let me see, Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
Do you have any more questions for Mr. Bozen or?
Well, I mean, my point is a deliberative body point, and that is this deliberative body is introducing and has introduced this as a resolution approved by the city council, not by the mayor, by the city council. Therefore, if we're approving as a city council a mask mandate, then it is up to the city council, if we are doing this indefinitely, to come back and terminate that resolution. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor. And I didn't see that was something that was really argumentative at all. But I mean, things that go into this for consideration of the indefinite nature of this is that, even now we're being asked, and I guess this sort of piggybacks on Councilman Greider. I hear CDC saying and suggesting that, you not only wear one mask, but you wear two masks. I hear just today that we got 20,000 people just, I believe, in Black Hawk County that are 65 years and older that are eligible now as of February 1st for the vaccination, but we only got 700 doses to give out. I hear also from CDC that we may be dealing with this in a next surge next winter. So there's a lot of things that go into this mask mandate. And I'm just asking, and I agree with the amendment that it be indefinite, but I believe that action needs to be taken by the council to end a resolution that we pass. That is just consistent with what we as a legislative body have required of us.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Amos.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we take a vote somewhere down the line to give you the power in emergencies to make certain decisions?
Yes.
Did we not do that as a council?
Yes, sir.
So I guess for me, when I hear Councilman Morrissey's question, I'm under the impression that you have the ability with the powers that have been bestowed on you to say, okay, done the checks, and yes, you will contact us and let us know, but you have the ability to end that mask mandate, as I understand it.
In our communities.
Hey, Mr. Manning. Mr. Manning.
Yes,
we
sir.
can hear you.
Oh, excuse me.
You know, it was just a question from a standpoint of, I think what Council Morrissey is asking is are you required to bring that back to the council as far as ending it?
Man, I don't, listen, this is one of those days where I just, so right now, I didn't make the motion, but I'm being asked to interpret, right? So I would probably say that some council members see this coming up every couple months, right? And they're like, it shouldn't have to come back every couple months. So they're trying to figure out a way to bring it back. Everyone knows that with regards to conversations with the health directors, with other mayors, with the League of Cities, with some state departments, folks probably know that with the own COVID response team that we have, that there's a sufficient amount of time that I spend digging through what's fact, what's not fact, or trying to get to the bottom of these things. So I think Mr. Boesen may have been saying that through all of these conversations and things, that maybe when it's time to move away from this, that I would be in a position to go ahead and end it and talk to council about that. That's what he was trying to get to, and so
Mr.
the
Mayor.
question was asked that this was brought by a deliberative body. Yes, I see that it was brought by a deliberative body. So deliberative body should be the one that would end it. I think that's what the other one was. So,
Yes, that's what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor.
So Mrs. Klein.
I support Mr. Bosen's amended version. I like the flexibility in it. I'm hopeful we won't have to go 12 weeks. And I would hate to see us lock into a date that we didn't need. So I'm all for Mr. Bosen's amended version.
Thank you. Mr. Foyce.
I was just going to call the question. That's all. Just to keep us moving.
So you indirectly called it. Like, I was going to call it. Now we're going to call it.
I wasn't sure if anybody else. I just wanted to make sure we started calling it. So, yep.
So why don't we say to Mr. Bosen's amendment, before I decide to do anything, I'll bring it to council to talk about it.
Fine.
All right. Or any other mayor. But to the amendment, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
and Mr. Boesen.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Now to the adoption.
And this is for all three resolutions. Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mrs. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Foyce,
Yes.
Mr. Greider,
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Boesen,
Yes.
and Mr. Amos.
Yes.
All right, thank you. 10, 11, and 12. And 10, 11, and 12.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Number 10 is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Terracon Consultants, Inc. of Cedar Falls, Iowa, in an amount not to exceed $22,860 in conjunction with the fiscal 2020 year Okay, let's do that again. With the FY 2020 Cortland, Jefferson, and Mulberry Streets Reconstruction Program, contract number 1015, and authorizing the mayor to execute said document. Number 11 is a resolution approving the system-wide infrastructure framework, SWIF, letter of intent in conjunction with the levee relief well testing and rehabilitation for the Waterloo, Iowa RDB Cedar River, RDB Black Hawk Creek, SW levee system, and authorizing the mayor to execute said document. And finally, number 12 is a resolution approving an amendment to a development agreement with Black Hawk Contracting and Development Corporation of Waterloo, Iowa, originally executed February 17th, 2014, to reassign the agreement to Paramount Investments, LLC, and modifying the rebates for years 1 through 3 for the project located at 301 and 3 through 311 East 3rd Street, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made with the second. Council questions? Anyone questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Foyce.
You. Can we have Noel talk a little bit about number 12 and what the amendment does?
Mr. Anderson.
Noel Anderson, Community Planning and Development Director. Essentially going back to when we drafted this development agreement, the project was given, we sold the land, and then the project was given 10 years at 50% tax rebates. The former owner had applied for Cura as well. The development agreement did not specifically say they could only do one or the other, but that's been our general policy and understanding. So now that we're to that point, we noticed that they had received the Cura. So we're basically clarifying that they will not get 13 years of incentives. They'll still only get a maximum of 10. So we're doing this amendment to clarify that for the new owners and for our records going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Anyone? Madam Clerk.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
And Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
All right, thank you. 13, 14, and 15. Anyone?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Greider.
I'd like to make the motion to adopt the following resolutions. 13, a resolution approving a professional services agreement with AECom Technical Services, Inc. of Waterloo, Iowa, in an amount not to exceed $83,500 in conjunction with the fiscal year 2021 Center for the Arts Parking Improvement Phase 3 Northwest Half Contract Number 1004, and authorizing the mayor to execute said document. 14 is a resolution approving an amendment to lease agreement with Anderson and Anderson Farms to farm approximately 36.1 acres of city-owned land, generally located north and east of North Crossing Development and on the east side of the East 4th Street, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document. And 15 is a resolution approving supplemental agreement number 3 with Willett Hoffman, formerly Amet, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in conjunction with Construction Engineering Services for the Amesboro Avenue Widening Project, Iowa DOT project number STP-A-8155, parentheses 757, parentheses -86-07, in the amount of $1,055.05, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
All right, thank you. Council, anybody, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. Jewin.
On number 15, could we just give an overview on what that supplemental agreement will do?
There were a lot of dashes in that, was.
There were a lot.
Sandy or Mohammed, could you talk about 15? I don't see Mohammed on here anymore. Sandy, can you talk about this item, or Randy?
Sandy Greco, Traffic Operations Director. This is basically for, we had to remove some more dirt on the corner to widen just a little bit. And so they had to do more testing in the soil. So that's basically what it's for. The intersection basically is done. There's just a few things we have to finish up before we totally complete the project. But it was just an unforeseen study that we had to do with the dirt.
All right. Any other questions? 13, 14, and 15? Mr. Bozen.
Thank you, sir. I had a question on 14. In reading our documents that we received, and I understand how we're working this lease agreement out, and basically it states, and Mr. Anderson stated in his documentation, that we're ready to start moving forward with some more development out there. Can Noel tell us when he'll be bringing that back before the council?
Mr. Anderson.
Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. Our intention would be to do a development agreement amendment with Ben Stroh up there for that partnership to continue, basically to look at some infrastructure moving ahead or moving north of the McDonald's area with what we'll call a backage road. So instead of a frontage road, it'll be back behind the first set of lots there. We are working on some cost estimates right now with Ben Stroh and his engineer. I would hope to bring that back to council really within the next month or so.
Thank you. It's nice to see some development out there on the north end of town. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
And Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Thank you. Could someone take 16?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion adopting a resolution approving an acquisition contract with Todd L. Chapman, Scott C. Chapman for the acquisition of 1.3 acres of land generally located at the south end of Fairfield Street in the amount of $33,000 plus costs, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute said document.
Second.
Motion was made with the second. We do have two speakers. First up, we have Mr. Jerry Stevens. Are you on? Well, maybe Mrs. Jerry. Could be Jerry or Jerry. But Stevens?
Mr. Mayor, it's Gary Stevens.
Oh, okay. Mr. Gary Stevens. Are you on, sir? Mr. Stevens? You're on mute.
For individuals that are on their telephone, they may have to push *6 to unmute their phones.
So *6, Mr. Morrissey did ask me to remind folks that too. Push *6 to unmute.
I pushed *6.
And we can hear you.
Now mute.
We're good.
You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good.
State your name and address
Thank you.
for the record, and the next 5 minutes is yours.
All right, thank you. My name is Gary Stevens. I live at 202 Fairfield Street. I've been here for the better part of 50 years. I grew up across from the old Lincoln Grade School over in West Parker. It's about a half mile away. So I've been around this end of town for, as it turns out, about 75 years. The land that Mr. Noel Anderson wants to buy is at the dead end part of Fairfield Street. This is in a neighborhood a half mile square bordered by Walker Street on the south, West Donald on the north, Cedar Bend on the west, Burton Avenue on the east. Most of these lots up in this neighborhood are about 80 by 200 feet, upwards to 3 acres. The people that are in my block that would be affected by this destruction of this natural wildlife area in our neighborhood are as follows. Excuse me. We got 3 school teachers, 1 retired, 2 nurses, 1 hospital worker at an office, the UNI assistant wrestling coach, a Blackhawk engineering technician, a ConAgra technician, a warehouse worker, a corporate employee, a banker, a Waterloo school employee, 2 ex-small business owners, a fireman, which was a lieutenant, finally to be a centurion that lives across the street from me. She's 100 years old now. She retired from Powers Manufacturing. Out of those about 20 people, 8 of them are retired. This is a manicured block, no traffic, no sidewalks in this area, except by the new Lincoln School. I am flipping the pages of my notes. I got a draft last year in June from Noel Anderson Department, and it was drafted by the City Engineering Department, Waterloo City Engineering Department. It shows the 2 lots and a storm water management area that's in this area. These lots are to be incorporated with 2 more lots east of that land in a landlocked area. This area is just south of where I want to buy, the lot that I want to buy. As it's turned out, is 1 lot's no good without the others. And it's all going to be wrapped around a cul-de-sac. Now, the draft that I got is kind of an aerial view. I guess they could call it a kind of like a topography map. And it shows the elevation lines in it going through this Chapman property that are low. And I heard years ago there was a pond in this area. That's probably why nobody's ever wanted to buy it. You can tell from sitting in my driveway that it's a pretty low area. And I guess Noel decided, and his people, that it needed a stormwater management area, which takes up 100 by 100 feet. Now, I won't talk at this time about the other lots that these have to be joined with to make it a pie-shaped configuration. But if you get the 2 lots together, it'd take up about a good 2.5 acres of trees, solid trees. Now, if there's any questions, I imagine that'd be kind of hard to do on my phone. I know I could hear them on the TV, but I would like to say this. Every time I turn down my street off of Virginia, the aesthetics of this block is unbelievable. Houses are all in a row, both sides, lines of trees. And you look down to my end where I live, solid trees. It's quite a sight. It's one of the prettiest blocks on the east side of Waterloo. And I'm from the east side of Waterloo. And I've been around all over. If you were to clear and grub this whole area, which you'd have to do to put housing in, clear means cut the trees, grub means dig out the root system. You'd way down quite low in the ground. Being it's already pretty low, I think you'd have one big water problem. If history's true, there was a pond there, that would be stupid putting any housing on there. What else can I say?
Well, we probably pretty much over about 5.5 minutes, but
oh, am I?
Yeah. So let me just get this. So, Mr. Stevens, you are not in support of this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh no, I'm not in favor at all.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Negative.
We also have Mr. Bob Manning, who would like.
Sir.
Mr.
Okay, Mayor?
Stevens, if you could mute your line so we can hear Mr. Manning.
I'm sorry I was making a little noise earlier, Mayor. I was drinking my V8 juice. And be glad to share this with the council or who's ever appropriate.
I need it.
My name is Bob.
Okay.
My name is Bob Manning. I'm the executive officer of the Cedar Valley Home Builders Association. Our headquarters is actually in Waterloo. I live personally at my address of 2908 West 3rd Street in Cedar Falls. We represent the entire Cedar Valley and care about new houses being built and lots being developed, especially when it's infill lots like this. I'm glad to hear that there's over 2 acres of trees there. I would hope that perhaps some of them can be preserved. As I understand, this is just 1.3 acres of land that's being sold. But this is exactly what we need in our communities. This is an infill lot that's going to add to the tax base. And I agree with the previous speaker. I've driven down on Fairview and all the streets surrounding it, and it's a very kept up neighborhood. A little hard to tell in the wintertime, but the houses look great, and that's the strength of Waterloo and the Cedar Valley communities is homeowners taking pride in their property and keeping it as neat as it is. I would think that the developers will be building similar size houses. You don't build larger houses than what the neighborhood generally has. You don't build smaller houses. You build very similar to what's there to fit in with the neighborhood. We frequently find in my business, in the home building business, where people say, not in my own backyard. That's objections that we've heard in Audubon Park when the Blue Wing development was developed 3 or 4 years ago. There were petitions and unfortunately some very upset people when they started the Blue Wing development. It's come along well, where there's about 8 houses built there now, occupied, and more lots have been sold over the winter, I understand, and we'll see more construction there this spring and summer. In addition, we've seen Lincolnshire, that's the new development that's built off of Amesboro. There are 6 houses in various stages of construction and completion in that street. Usually one of the objections to a development like this is the increased traffic that it's going to have. But we're talking about 5 houses, and in a cul-de-sac, that's very, very desirable by the buyers in the community to not have through traffic. And so having this land as a cul-de-sac is certainly going to be one of the big pluses for the developers and the eventual homeowners that are there. The Cedar Valley Home Builders Association itself is an organization of 60 contractors and subcontractors and related businesses to construction. That represents $90 million of new construction in our communities each and every year. That's substantial. That's providing jobs for some of the people that live in the Fairview area, and certainly others. I would imagine that people moving in could very likely be firefighters, policemen. They may work for a heating or a plumbing company, but they're going to be very similar to what the neighbors are there. And this is a great neighborhood. You've got a school close by, so that encourages families. You've got the softball complex not far away, which is a tremendous benefit to our community. There's a lot of good things going for this. You know, when we buy property, we don't know what's going to happen across the street or in our own backyard. I grew up on Logan Avenue at 1252 Logan Avenue. And when the new highway was put in several years ago, we said, gee, that's going to wreck the neighborhood. Well, it actually ended up making it much prettier than it was. But that was hard for some of us to admit to. This type of lot development is exactly what the city of Waterloo needs to see infill development in all parts of the city. That's the exciting part about this, is that it's infill lots in addition to the city where we need to see new housing and housing priced in the range that will be appropriate for potential buyers. The Cedar Valley Home Builders Association would be excited to work with the developers and builders there where it's appropriate, with our subs working for them or other contractors working for them to help with the framing or the finish or whatever it may be. But please, 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 this is exactly what we've wanted in the city of Waterloo to complement the other things that are going on. And sometimes when you live in the neighborhood, it can be hard to say, well, I don't want this, but then I don't own the land. So whoever owns the land within reason gets to make some of the decisions. So we're fully supportive of this. We'd like to do anything to help the builders or the developers that we can do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm mute, Mr. Mayor.
I see there's a 2300752. I was wondering if that person wanted to speak. So Chris, if you could do your unmuting. Those that may want to speak, you got to hit *6.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Anthony McGrain, 229 Fairfield Street.
Okay.
I think Mr. McGrain, we do have you on the list, but I think that person just unmuted themselves, those trying to speak.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself so that person can speak.
Okay. Well, okay, 0752, could you state your name and address for the record? And then
yes,
you have 3 minutes.
my name is Charles Harp. I live at 232 Fairfield Street. My wife and my wife has lived here since 1972. And I would venture to say every house on this block is at least 65 years old. And it's such a well-kept area. Like Gary Stevens said, you turn down the street, you can't believe the lawns, how kept up they are, the trees, the huge trees, and it all ends in a great wooded area down there where there's plenty of wildlife. There's fox down there, there's all kinds of birds, there's deer. And you'd be surprised at the number of bird watchers we get walking down our street. Dog walkers, grandchildren being walked by their grandparents because it's such a quiet area. And I know that we're talking about 5 houses. You're maybe talking about, 10 vehicles? Maybe more. That's a 30% gain of traffic in our area. And we don't need that. We don't want that. And besides that, what about the parking? If they have a party down there, some of the people that live in those few places, the 5 places, where will they park? Will they be parking on the street? And that will add to some confusion and probably some misunderstandings. And so I would just like the city council to think about the 90 to 100 people that signed this petition. That encompasses a lot more people because we have grandchildren, we have friends come over to visit, and they go on walks. We teach our grandchildren how to ride bikes on this small block that's basically almost untraveled, and we just don't want to lose all that.
All right, thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Mr.
you.
McGrain. Mr. McGrain, yeah, there you go.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, Tony McGrain, my wife and I, Sherry, live at 229 Fairfield Street. We live right in the middle of the block. We are opposed to the city purchasing this property for a housing development. We realize that we can't control what happens to the 1.3 acres owned by the Chapmans. That's their property, and if they were to sell it and for development, we can't control that. But we're opposed to the city purchasing the land in order to develop it and adding 5 houses to the end of our block. We moved here in 2015, and we moved here from the west side of Waterloo because of the established neighborhood, the character, the quietness, and the low traffic, big yards. I live in the middle of the block. There's only 6 houses south of me. If you were to add 5 more houses, you're gonna almost double the traffic. That's 100% increase in the traffic on my street, on our street. That lot was for sale when I moved in. In 2015, Jerry Chapman had that lot for sale. It was listed, and as far as I know, he never got a nibble. It's lower. It sits lower than our house. The houses around that, even when the river comes up, I gotta believe that they've got wet basements over down on that end of the block. I moved in this neighborhood because of it's established. Nothing's happened here in 65 years, except for maybe curb and gutters put in, which I applaud that. But when I looked at this property, I looked at the neighbors' houses. I looked at how they took care of their property. I saw the vacant lot at the end of the street, but it didn't look like anything was ever going to be built there. And I realize this isn't a not in my backyard sort of thing. And Bob Manning's got good arguments for everything, but Fairview Street is a long ways away from Fairfield, so I don't even know if he's familiar with this area, but he kept mentioning Fairview. Charlie has commented, and Charlie and I stand out in the street and we've discussed this. I'm not opposed to Gary Stevens building his garage. I think that's a great idea. It's on city-owned property. If Gary were to purchase that and build his garage, then you can tax him for it, and it would add to the tax roll. But I'm opposed to the city getting involved with purchasing this land to give it to a developer to double the traffic on my dead-end street.
All right, thank you, Mr. McGrain.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to council's comments. Council.
Mayor, we do have one more registered speaker, actually.
Okay, please.
Kent Cowell.
Mr. Cowell, it's your floor.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can.
Okay. Well, I'm one of these retired guys that really doesn't get technology, and I still have a flip phone. So I'm opposed to this. I live at 241. My name is Kent Cowell. I live at 241 Fairfield Street. And those are all my neighbors that spoke earlier, except for Mr. Manning. And I will reiterate what Tony said was that this is Fairfield, not Fairview. And for the other city council members, this is northwest Waterloo, not northeast Waterloo. But nevertheless, some of my questions is we were told that the planning and zoning claimed that they were going to get $5,000 per year tax from each of these lots. And I don't know how that's going to happen because I own a half acre and my taxes are like $2,300 a year. So I don't know where they're getting that. I don't know where those figures came from. We are called the Woods neighborhood. It's an established neighborhood. There's who is there a developer that's going to buy the rest of these lots? And what are the lots going to be sold for after the city purchases this? Who's responsible for clearing out the woods and developing the land, and what happens to our street? Because it's just basically it's a seal coat street, and we got all these heavy trucks running up and down here, hauling all this wood out. What's that going to do to the street? And how long will it take? Because I don't know if you've ever had to deal with contractors before, but it's a slow-moving process a lot of times. And I think Waterloo needs to keep more green areas like this down here. Just the other morning, I looked out, here's 5 deer walking from the woods up Fairfield Street in a line. They turned around and went back down Normandy to the other side. Like Charlie said, we have fox that live down there, all kinds of birds. And then I think Mr. Morrissey was telling me that Noel Anderson said this will be the first houses that were built in East Waterloo since 1970. Well, I dispute that because there's a whole bunch of houses over at the old Lincoln School that were built since then. So those are my concerns, is that, and also like the increased traffic and how long will we have to deal with the trucks going up and down the street? Because, and I think someone had mentioned to me at the city that, well, this way the snowplow won't have to back up. Well, it's like a block. If you're going to put it in a cul-de-sac so that snowplow has a place to turn around, really? I don't really think it's that big of a hardship for them because, A, no one parks on the street here. So, because we all have driveways and we're all set way back from the road, from the street. So we all have long driveways and plenty of places to park our cars. And you look out, and I don't think the snowplow guys ever have a problem because they don't have to go around cars parked in the street. But anyway, that's my biggest concern is the traffic and losing the green space down there. And, the quality of life we just love the wildlife and the deer coming up through the yard, cleaning up the acorns in our front yard. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kyle. Kelly, for public comments, are we out?
That's it.
All right. Council, I know you have some questions.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Amos.
This isn't so much a question as one of the things that for me, I've been thinking about this a lot. It's not in my ward, it's Councilman Morrissey's ward, but for me, I look at what Noel has done. Noel is doing the job that he's supposed to do from a standpoint of finding areas that can be developed and put houses on them infill so that we can lower the taxes for citizens. But myself, and the way that I view this is one of the things that I do know, and someone that I respect very much told me that I work for the people. So for me, having said that, and listening to citizens who live in that area, knowing that there's a petition out there where many citizens have said, no, we do not want this development in our area, that is the direction that I will be going is with the citizens. I just needed to say that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Amos.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have several things, so bear with me, okay, in council. But in addressing both the council and you, Mr. Mayor, I want to bring the council's attention to the fact that Mr. Anderson has sent out an email to all of us that included some statements regarding this issue. And to me, the statements in there were very dismissive and condescending to the people that live in this area and the people that are opposed to this. And a statement saying that this neighborhood has not seen any new house since 1956 is misleading at best, especially when it's followed up by a statement, and I quotes, on the north side of Waterloo, quotes. And there have been plenty of new homes built on the north side of Waterloo since 1956. And even in this area in question, which the email does mention, the Old Lincoln School area project. So this area that we're talking about here has really no infill. There have been no houses tore down or anything like this. This is a woods. That woods has been there 2/3 of a century and beyond. Secondly, in the email, there is a point there that talks about opposition. And then condescendingly, there's a statement made, change is scary. Many neighbors do not want change. Development of a community will involve change somewhere and at some time. Well, I don't think that is anything that anybody would question. But what is questioned is when there's change that destroys the character of a property, that destroys the quality of life in a neighborhood, that destroys the reason why people have moved to this area. And you've heard just 4 examples. That petition, council, includes 91 signatures gathered within just a few weeks. And then it was discontinued. But if you want to, they can go back and get another 7 pages of signatures from people. This is not a not in my backyard situation. This is a quality of life. Do we as a council believe in conservation of our natural resources? Or is it all about the almighty buck? Is that what it's all about? And I would hope that the council would side with the people that are saying, we have a woods here. This is why we're here. It means something to all of us all around in this extended neighborhood. Every one of those 91 people are taxpayers. Do you want those taxpayers to be paying for something that they do not want to see happening within their area? And next, I just want to go to the fact that, you know, Mr. Mayor, you sign a proclamation and read a proclamation once a year. For 36 straight years, Waterloo has been designated a tree city. We have an area here now, 1.3 acres of woods. And this proclamation that is read by you, Mr. Mayor, and the council listens to, I've listened to it for 7 straight years. And it says, now therefore, I, the mayor of the city of Waterloo, hereby proclaim Arbor Day in the city of Waterloo and urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to, in caps, protect our trees and our woodlands, and urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Do we as a council want to go against a designation that has been given to us for 36 straight years? To be eligible for that designation, we have to have a tree board or part of a department. We have to have a tree care ordinance. We have to have a community forestry issue or proposal proposition program. And we also have to have that Arbor Day proclamation. 91 people minimum are crying out to us as a council to do the right thing here, Mr. Mayor. And that is to preserve their quality of life in their neighborhood. So I'm asking this council, don't destroy quality of life in this neighborhood for all of the people around there. Thank you very much. And I hope that you will oppose this resolution and vote it down and leave that neighborhood with its character and its personality.
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Klein, hold on. Because, you know, condescending is in the eyes of the beholder or who took it that way. Noel has aggressively worked to help me, to help council transform and try to change areas of this community that has seen an incredible disinvestment. So when we talk about someone being condescending to people, you know, there was also the City of Waterloo, Iowa goals. There's 4 goals that were also mentioned. So Mr. Amos touched on it perfectly at the beginning of this, but I do take exception of, you know, us trying to prove a point and saying that a staff member that we know who has gone and worked his hardest to try to transform blighted areas of this community, I'm not talking about that one, to say that he's being condescending or doesn't have that type of feel to help support this community. I do take exception to that. Number 2, no, before we go to Mrs. Klein, no, I want to give you an opportunity to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Noel Anderson, Community Planning and Development Director. And yeah, I mean, apologies if someone misread. My job as a staff person is to inform the council of information on the current request and past requests. You know, our goals are always to enhance neighborhoods. Following the strategic plan, it talks about, you know, reduce the city's property tax levies through a responsible balance of cost reduction. It goes into creating buildable lots in the Cura, especially. So that was our goal with here, as well as trying to create a positive out of a 657A action. You know, this is a great neighborhood. I tried to point that out in the email information. It's a quarter mile from Tibbetts Park. It's a quarter mile from Cedar Bend Park. It's a quarter mile from Sans Souci Island as the crow flies. So, I mean, there's a lot of green space out here. I think normally with this type of a development, you would see that most new housing that would go in there, they are going to have to cut down some trees if we move that forward. But they would try to preserve the trees. That's part of the beauty of the area. You know, other residents of Waterloo might be able to enjoy this neighborhood as the current residents do. The information I provided was not meant to be misleading. The house is on this block. The last one that was built was in 1956. So that was my point of bringing that up and talking about this immediate area, not the entire north side. We have had some successful pocket areas of redevelopment with the Lincoln School site and some others. So we're continuing to try to do that. And I just appreciate the council's time and effort on this, however you want to vote on this. Again, as the mayor noted, you know, my job here is to be innovative. My job is to be strategic in how we can use our land and proactive in trying to bring new builders here, bring Bob Anning's teams here so that they're building in Waterloo and not other communities in Blackhawk County.
All right, Mrs. Klein.
I have just a quick legal question. Ever since I've been on the council, when there are developments proposed like this, people come before us and sincerely talk about how it will impact their neighborhood. If we were to turn this down, would this cause development to effectively be frozen in Waterloo? Because then would we legally be able to cancel a development when another group comes before us? Could they turn around and sue us if we don't make this? I just don't understand. I think it's a big question. I'd like to have a legal answer on it.
I think Marty, Kelly, and Noel's here. I don't know if this one will have legal implications, but anytime we have a prospect of 4 to 5 houses built, other developers throughout the community and beyond take a look at to see how we do, how we treat people. and how we treat capital that could potentially come here. So yeah, there'll be some folks that probably look and say, I may not want to put up with the hassle, but I don't know if we're legally implicated in this particular situation. Noel or Kelly, do you anything different?
I think you put that very well, Mayor, that I mean, we have the options that we want to move ahead with as the council sees fit, but our actions are always watched.
For example, I believe the person that may be interested has also tried to get another location. And then depending upon how we vote, this would be potentially a second location they may not be able to get to. So, we'll see what council says. Questions, anyone?
Yeah, Mr.
Ms. Jewin.
I appreciate everything the neighbors are saying, that they don't want their neighborhood changed, and I appreciate that. But we have seen many other neighborhoods come to us with similar arguments. They don't want the change in their neighborhood. Orange and Audubon in my area fought it very strenuously because they didn't want their neighborhood changed. So while you might not like the NIMBY title, and I appreciate that, it is very common that people like development. They want the city developed. They want the tax base to grow, but just don't do it in my backyard. And so I find that unfortunately not very equitable. And I think that gets maybe to some of Mrs. Klein's argument that we should treat all of our developments equitably. And if we're saying, well, gee, we're going to force this development on you, but we're not going to develop it on you, I think we need to be a little cautious there. As far as the woods, I appreciate that, but as Mr. Anderson pointed out, there are numerous greenbelt areas, wooded areas in the entire city, and certainly many of them close to this neighborhood. The other thing is, and I don't mean to be offensive with this, but if you really cared about that wooded area, if it was so important to you to preserve that, why didn't you buy it? Then if it was in your ownership, then you had the last word. You had to say. You could have purchased that property. And now, because you didn't want to purchase it for whatever reason, you don't want us to do it as well. And again, when we're talking about equity, I don't think that's an equitable argument. I am in favor of this. I think it's not going to be damaging to that road, to that neighborhood. We're talking about 5 houses. We're still having a cul-de-sac. It's still going to be a beautiful area. And so I will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Since I was the one that postponed this for this meeting so that we could get further information, I would like to make a note that I received no emails except from one individual. I've received 2 emails from the same individual, but no one else on the 200 block of Fairfield contacted me about this development. And I appreciate the fact that 91 people signed that petition. But if you looked at the 91 signatures, 16 of those signatures lived in the 200 block of Fairview, and some of them were husband-wife combinations. So I don't think it's well representative of the entire area of the 91 signatures, but it's not well representative of the entire 200 block of Fairfield, because it is a long block. It truly is. That's all I've got to say. I wish more people would have contacted me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else that hadn't made comments yet?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Greider.
So this is a hard one. As someone who studies and teaches history, I understand the deeply held desire to maintain the things of our past, and the memories and the dreams and the hopes that are encapsulated in those things that we have held dear for a long time. But I also understand that as elected leaders, we also have to think about the future and what that means for the city and what it means for our whole community. And sometimes those decisions are tough. And sometimes those decisions are perhaps unpopular in the moment, but they are the balance of what has come before so that we can build what will be tomorrow. And so I have viewed this property. I drove down there and looked at it, and they are right. It is a beautiful property, but it is also near other beautiful green spaces that we as a city have done a good job preserving and defending. And so at this point, I will be supporting this development agreement, understanding the pain and heartbreak that it might bring to some people, but also understanding that together we will move forward from this and be stronger as a neighborhood and as a city.
All right, thank you. All right, there are no
Mr.
other.
Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mr. Morrissey, Mr. Foyce, or anyone that didn't speak, do you have any comments?
Do
All
not.
right, Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Well, you know, there is something to the fact that I heard Councilwoman Jewin talk about other developments in other places and not in my backyard and different areas. There's a big difference between what happened then and what this resolution is asking us to approve. Those other developments already were private. They were private developers going in with plans. They were not like this is, where we are saying that we want to acquire, we as a city want to acquire and then develop. Those other examples were developments that were there by private companies for development that had to go through the planning and zoning and all those other issues that went with that. This is different. This is the city saying, we're going to purchase this and then we're going to develop it. This is the city of Waterloo saying that we're going to take away the woods from this entire neighborhood. And for Councilman Bozen to talk about the people that were on there and how many lived in the same household in that, and people haven't contacted him. You have a petition with 91. And as I said earlier, we can have another petition go around and we'll get another 100 signatures on it. This is totally opposed. And, you know, this whole concept should have been brought up months ago about doing something like this and wanting to acquire this property. Therefore, in a closed session, we could have had some deliberation about this because this was on the table way back in July and June. But it never, ever met a closed session, an executive session to talk about city acquiring property. That's not okay that we do things that way. And I want to remind Ms. Jewin and Mr. Bozen that they're council at large. They represent all of the people in Waterloo. And that includes all of the people in this neighborhood that are being affected if this is approved.
Mr. Mayor,
If you want to respond or vote,
I want to just say that I realize, and Mr. Boson realizes, we represent the entire city. We really don't need election. Thank you.
yes, ma'am. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
No.
Mr. Morrissey?
No.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
And Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Could someone take 17 and 18? I think Mrs. Jewin at 17 and 18.
Be glad to. Number 17 is motion approving denial of an application for a Class C liquor license for Demi Enterprises LLC, DBA Demi Day Spa, located at 3261 University Avenue. And number 18, hold on. I've got to find number 18. Number 18 is a motion approving change order number 4 with Cardinal Construction of Waterloo, Iowa, for a net increase of $88,881 in conjunction with the 5 Sullivan Brothers Convention Center addition and renovation project, and authorizing the mayor to create said document.
Second.
Motion has been made with the second. I was going to ask Noel to give on 18. Noel, or you and Nathan, can somebody tell us what's going on?
Sure, Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director, and I do see Nathan is still on. I'll give a quick overview and he can definitely go into more details. As you may recall, when we started the work on the convention center, we knew that there was a lot of work to do, which would be done in a lot of phases, to try to move along pretty quickly with the funds that we had available and to try to avoid events. We went ahead with the chiller project and the exhibit hall ceiling right away. When we were doing the exhibit hall ceiling, at one point, we talked about the possibility of the addition that we'll be moving ahead with the grant money, but it was never fully funded or anything at that point. So we did not do some of the firewall activities with the exhibit hall project back then because we weren't sure about the addition. Now that we're moving ahead with the addition plans and working with ISG, to try and figure out, the city staff and ISG have tried to figure out the best way to meet all of the fire code standards. And I know that we've gone through a couple of different ways. The original way with doing the work more at the exhibit halls types, and Nathan can explain this probably better, was looking like it was going to cost more. So we started going with a different alternative using the existing wall system. And that is the project that is before you today, is to move ahead with that.
This is Nathan. Yeah, this is Nathan Compton with ISG Architecture, and I'd be happy to share more if you guys want a little more in-depth dive on that.
Yeah, we want just a little bit. So yeah, please do.
Okay. So originally, the reason this wasn't in the project, even though we knew about this, as Noel shared, was just due to the phasing. We knew this had to be done. And because the design of this was happening while construction was going on for the exhibition hall, we had originally, while we were going through design, thought we will pull this piece off, put it into the exhibition hall ceiling work to save us the money of having to tear into that ceiling when it was all done, because we were originally going to approach it where we were going to put a firewall separating the exhibition hall from the lobby space. And so that was the original approach. Peters went through and did a pricing exercise, and we received pricing on going with that approach. Basically, while the documents for the 5 Sullivan's addition and renovation project were out to bid. And at that point, we realized it was going to be more, the cost was getting much higher than we anticipated. And we then started discussions on going a different route. And that is where we decided later on, we got the bids back and we started working through the design and decided to move the firewall with some discussions with the city planners and the fire marshal, working through what the best location was going to be, which took some time. And that firewall ended up getting shifted. And so that's why this amount wasn't in the original bid documents, because that kind of happened during the planning review stage and was originally going to be peeled off and put in the exhibition hall. But ultimately, to try to save the city money, we kind of shifted around how we were going to approach it.
All right, council questions?
Mayor.
Mr. Bozen.
I have a number of questions, and if you don't mind, if I could just do them one at a time instead of rattling off 4 or 5 of them and trying to go back. And the first question I have is how long have we known about this, and that we've needed to move forward with this? I'm thinking that this has been on the planning table for a long time, and now all of a sudden we're pushed up a deadline that we have to approve this $88,000 tonight, or we're not going to be able to have events take place this spring. That's my first.
How long have we known, folks?
So this is Nathan again with ISG. This 88,000 change order that we have on the table, we just put together this past week. We have known about the work for a little while. We've known about it since really back since August. When we sent out, I'm looking through my dates. Basically, in the fall, we sent out a PR, or we started working through the design. Then we sent out a PR, I think, back in November was the original price request that we sent. And then we received pricing back from that before Christmas. We did not like what we saw. It was much higher than we anticipated. So we did a pretty deep dive into it and had some challenges. Basically, we had some back and forth with the contractor that took us from $150,000 change down to what you see today.
Okay. And this would, Noel or Michelle, what events are scheduled in the convention center between now and the home show, April 4th through the 6th?
Let me see. I may have that list.
Funky Junkaloo is before the home show. The home show may have been the second one.
What about the dart tournament?
I think that's after that. They're rescheduling to later.
Okay. So this work, all of this work will be, hopefully, it needs to be done before the home show. Am I correct in that assumption? I don't know who can answer.
Well, so let me add to that last part. So what I'm seeing is Funky Junkaloo, the Hope City Eastern Iowa Home Show, and possibly State Darts April to 26th to May 2nd. I'm seeing would have to be canceled or rescheduled. So it's several different ones on this list that I have. Mr. Bozen, repeat your question again for me.
My question is it necessary that this work needs to be completed prior to us having these events? And what bothers me about that, sir, is that the information that Cardinal sent us today when this was put on the agenda, and you start looking at the lead times that they're quoting. I mean, they're quoting a 7 to 9 week lead time for doors and hardware, and that doesn't count mounting those doors or even painting those doors. And 9 weeks puts us past the home show. And so when I'm looking at this, they're having problems with fire dampers, and then they've got to put the ceiling back in. They're having problems with the transfer fans that they haven't worked this problem out yet. And the delivery date's March 19th. I'm just seeing a number of problems because we went through this when we tried to move everybody out for that auction and then move them back in. And then, we were we're not guaranteed, but we had spoke about the fact that all life safety provisions needed to be in place. And then we ended up putting a fire watch in because we couldn't make it work. So when I look at this stuff that Cardinal sent us today, I'm really, really concerned because I don't see how with the lead times that they're giving us that we're even going to get this work done prior to the events that we have scheduled, sir.
From Nathan, Cardinal is confident they can get this done?
Cardinal has stated, I can't remember the date right now, but we were talking about it earlier today that we feel we have a plan in place from conversations both with Fire Marshal and Greg Allhelm and myself. regarding a plan for these spaces and what needs to be done to be able to have those events in place.
Yeah, because the whole world will be watching, especially for those folks that do have things scheduled. And I know this is one of the paradoxes that we have, you know, when you're in a situation where you want to keep the events that you have, because we know in some aspects, if they're gone, and we need revenue after. But you also, we go back to the first point when we had all this discussion is about making sure that all fire safety, everything is in place, or life safety is in place, so that we can make sure we have protected events. Whether or not something bad happens or not, we still need to have things in place. But Mr. Bozen.
And sir, and the reason I bring this up is that when we talk about your life safety, we're talking about the fire alarm, we're talking about the sprinkler system, we're talking about exit and emergency lighting, we're talking about all exiting from that venue, as well as the stair towers and everything working. And when we look at a 7 to 9 week lead time just on the number of doors that we have to order, kudos to Cardinal if they can get all of that in that short period of time. But 9 weeks puts us past the home show.
Right. I think what I can say that is that if we don't do this tonight, we know for sure that we're not going to. This gives them the best shot. I say us, because ultimately the city's responsible, right? But gives them the best chance of getting this stuff completed. So Cardinal's confident they can get it done.
I agree. I'm just curious what plan our architect said that the fire marshal and building department, they have a plan in place if this isn't done, and that plan is not going to be another fire watch. I mean, we've been through the route, so I would hope that I don't know if the fire chief's on or not, but I worry about this, and I have a background in it, so I worry even more than the average person, and that's all I've got to say, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bozen. Council, tight schedule. Madam Clerk.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
Mr. Bozen?
Yes.
Mr. Amos? Mr. Morrissey?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Foyce?
Yes.
And Mr. Greider?
Yes.
Do we get Mr. Amos?
Yes,
It looked like you said yes.
I did.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion been made with second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, council.
Thank you, Mayor.